I know. You didn't expect to open this video and see a cow mooing, but even though it doesn't make sense at first glance, cows have become a big problem in Ukraine. But hold on. It's not what you're thinking. We're not talking about agriculture or food or any obvious issue you might imagine. We're talking about a technological revolution that started when Ukrainian engineers realized that they needed to teach an artificial intelligence to identify the sounds of a cow's mooing. It would solve a big problem, but it was more complicated than it seemed. This discovery led to something that is even impressing NATO, a technology so simple and ingenious that it cost less than 2 Patriot missiles, but managed to completely change the rules of air defense. Let me tell you this impressive story. It all started with a company that cloned voices for Hollywood and a very specific problem involving cows. To understand this story, I need to take you back to February of 2022. Russia had launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and Russian drones and missiles began bombing Ukrainian cities every day. The problem was that these attacks came in at low altitude, below the coverage of regular radars. Ukraine urgently needed a way to detect these threats. The solution came from 3 very different people. First, Dmitry Belyevtsov, the chief technology officer at Respeecher, a Ukrainian company that did something very specific. They cloned voices using artificial intelligence. They were so good at it that Hollywood would hire them to recreate the voices of Star Wars characters. Second, Pavlo Tsyupka, an engineer from a home automation company in Lviv. And third, Marian Sulin, a soldier from the 125th Territorial Defense Brigade who was literally on the front line. Their idea was brilliant in its simplicity. If they could teach artificial intelligence to distinguish between different human voices, why not teach the same technology to distinguish between the sound of a Russian missile and all the other sounds in the Ukrainian countryside? This is where the cow problem starts. When they tested the first system, which they called zvuk, the Ukrainian word for sound, the artificial intelligence was only 50% accurate. It was literally a deadly coin toss. And do you know why? The artificial intelligence was confusing missiles with wind, passing cars, insects, engineers' voices, chainsaws cutting wood, and yes, cows mooing. The team spent an entire month trying to solve specifically what they called the cow problem. Imagine the situation. Highly skilled engineers working day and night to teach a machine the difference between the sound of a weapon of war and a cow mooing. The real problem was more complex. They discovered that the training data they collected from the internet was completely inadequate. A missile, recorded from far away, sounds completely different from a missile passing nearby. It was like training someone to recognize cars by only showing pictures of parked cars and then asking them to identify cars moving on the road. And the solution didn't come from more sophisticated algorithms, but from better data. Soldiers in real combat zones started recording the actual sounds of missiles and drones flying nearby. It was 700 hours of audio labeled one by one. With soldiers literally risking their lives to teach a machine to save other lives. The result was impressive. In just 4 hours after installing the first station that actually worked, the Zvuk system detected a cruise missile. The team managed to achieve what they called zero false negatives, meaning the system never failed to identify a real threat. But the initial SVUK had its limits. There were only 40 stations spread across Ukraine, covering about 5% of the territory. The range was modest, 5 kilometers for drones, 8 kilometers for missiles. It was a brilliant proof of concept, but not a nationwide solution. That's when 2 Ukrainian engineers showed up, and they had a radical idea. Their motto was to set aside technical sophistication and pursue extreme simplicity. American General James Hecker described their solution well, saying, "They put a microphone and a cell phone on a 2-meter stick." This approach created what became known as the Sky Fortress. Instead of sophisticated stations with curved acoustic mirrors and dedicated computers, each sensor cost between $400 and $500 and used parts you can buy at any electronics store. The magic was in the math. When 3 or more sensors detect the same sound, the small differences in the arrival time at each point can be used to calculate the exact location of the source. It's the same principle as global positioning system, but applied to sound waves instead of radio signals. Ukraine ended up placing between 8,000 and 14,000 of these simple sensors throughout the country. The total cost of the network was calculated at less than $54 million. Just so you have an idea, that's less than the price of 2 Patriot missiles. Do you want to know what happened next? Well, the results were devastating for the Russians. In a specific battle in 2024, the system allowed Ukrainian forces to intercept 80 out of 84 incoming Russian drones, a success rate of 95%. What makes this even more impressive is how they intercepted the drones. The Sky Fortress detected the threat, calculated its trajectory, and sent the coordinates to mobile teams in pickup trucks. These teams, which could be trained in just 6 hours, used heavy machine guns, including some Maxim machine guns from World War I. It was a perfect combination of high and low technology. Modern artificial intelligence guiding last century's machine guns, and it worked perfectly against the Russian strategy of using cheap drones to exhaust Ukraine's expensive Western air defense missiles. But the evolution didn't stop there. The third stage represents a fundamental shift from passive defense to active hunting. The German company Quantum Systems, a drone manufacturer, bought the Polish company Welles Acoustics, specifically to put acoustic sensors on their drones, called Vector. These new sensors are the size of an index finger and weigh only a few grams, but they can detect artillery fire at distances of up to 15 kilometers. The technology is fascinating. They use heated platinum wires, similar to a wind gauge, to directly measure the speed of sound particles. The strategic impact is enormous. Normally, locating and destroying enemy artillery is a complex process that involves multiple steps. First, the sensor detects, then an analyst processes, then an observer confirms, and then a shooter engages. Each step takes time, and time means the enemy artillery can escape. Vector drones compress this whole process into a single platform that works on its own. The drone detects the shot, automatically points its cameras in the direction of the sound, visually confirms the target, and transmits precise coordinates for counterattack, reducing the process from minutes to seconds. Do you know what was most curious about this story? NATO's reaction. They were stunned by all this Ukrainian innovation. General Hecker, whom we mentioned earlier, said he was very impressed. He even tested this system at the American Air Base in Ramstein, Germany. Tom Goffes, NATO's Deputy Secretary General, described this development as crazy, especially highlighting the low cost for national coverage. But these enthusiastic reactions also reveal something uncomfortable for the West. You see, while NATO normally takes 5 to 10 years to create and approve a new military system, Ukraine managed to develop 3 different versions of this acoustic technology in just 3 years. And keep in mind, this was during a war, when everything should have been more difficult. The difference here isn't about resources or technical capability, it's about structure and
urgency. Porque ou adotamos.
I'm talking about small, focused teams working directly with end users on the front lines who can innovate much faster than large state bureaucracies, even with much smaller budgets. It's important to remember that acoustic detection doesn't replace conventional radars. In fact, they complement each other. Radar offers superior range and works at any altitude or in any weather condition. The problem is that they are active, more expensive, and can be targeted by electronic warfare. Acoustic detection, on the other hand, works passively, is inexpensive, and is especially effective against low-altitude threats. But it has limited range and can be affected by ambient noise. The combination of the two creates a much more robust, multi-layered defense system that's harder to overcome. The most impressive aspect of this story is how it challenges our ideas about military innovation. For a long time, we believed that military technological advances required billions of dollars, cutting-edge laboratories, and years of development. Ukraine has proven that this isn't necessarily true. The Ukrainian model of innovation has specific characteristics that make it so effective. First, the direct proximity between developers and end users. Second, the absence of bureaucratic layers. There are no committees, endless reviews, or approval processes that take months. Third, and perhaps most importantly, this way of thinking that good enough now is better than perfect later. The initial Souk system had false alarms, but it detected all real threats. It was good enough to save lives immediately and could be improved later. This approach contrasts sharply with Western military thinking, which prioritizes perfect systems over quick solutions. A Patriot missile is technically superior to a heavy machine gun guided by artificial intelligence, but it costs millions of times more and cannot be produced in the necessary quantity. And because it's so accessible, this technology is already spreading rapidly. Russia, for example, is developing its own acoustic systems, directly copying Ukrainian designs. China is studying these innovations in detail to apply them to its own military programs. Even smaller countries are exploring how to adapt these concepts to their own defense realities. And this creates a very interesting situation. Stop and think. The same technology that's protecting Ukraine today could be used against Western forces tomorrow. It's the classic dilemma of military innovation. Every advantage is temporary. Meanwhile, evolution continues. The next developments will likely include even greater integration of different types of sensors, even smaller equipment, and more advanced artificial intelligence capabilities. Acoustic sensors could be integrated into individual soldiers' equipment, creating personal detection networks. Smaller drones will be able to carry groups of even more sophisticated sensors. As you can see, the future of this technology goes far beyond the military. That's because the same principles can be applied to civil security, environmental monitoring, and even commercial applications. Acoustic sensor networks could detect gas leaks, monitor wildlife, or identify unauthorized vehicles in protected areas. In the end, Ukraine's acoustic revolution will be remembered not only for the drones it helped bring down, but for the ideas it broke. It proved that small, agile teams can outperform large bureaucracies, that the urgency of real need accelerates innovation in ways no budget can buy, and that sometimes the simplest solution is also the most revolutionary. The story that began with engineers trying to teach a machine the difference between a cow and a missile ended up changing the nature of modern warfare. And this is just the beginning. Now I want to know your opinion. Do you believe that small, innovative teams can really outperform large companies and governments when it comes to solving complex problems? Leave your comment below. I'm curious to know what you think about this change in the way of doing things. If this video made you see technological innovation in a different light, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with anyone you think would also be impressed by this story. See you next time.